I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today on skills and standards, and we'll just give a couple of minutes for people to log on. But what I would like to do first is just acknowledge that we're all in Indigenous country. I happen to be on the Kaurna lands, and I want to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging leaders, and recognise the lands on which we all meet. It's been great to get to know you over the last year or so, because we're recent friends, and we discovered a number of mutual friends. That's how we got to know each other, people of common interests. John Mason from CDU, who's a standards guru, and
who happened to be my supervisor for my master's study.
And David Morgan, who used to run Artipus. So for some of the audience, these people may be known to them. And so that was a great way for us to connect. And I just love the fact that you're really focused on RPL. And so for those who don't know Deb, among other things, well-known consultant and thought leader on RPL, but also doing your PhD at the moment. So that's great. And we just had a colleague join from Canada who has explained the lands that they're meeting on. So that's fantastic in the chat. And let me say, I want to encourage anyone who's been before or is new, please, we're going to respond to questions later on in the chat. And what we want to do is set up this conversation, particularly around skills and meaning today, which feeds directly into RPL. So, Deb, your experience is going to be really valuable. Just to frame it first, I wanted to just read a paragraph. I was going to talk about this, but some people may be aware that the National Skills Taxonomy Project at Jobs and Skills Australia has just released an update paper. And I think that they've done a good job in this update paper of identifying the dilemmas, the very things we're going to talk about today, like what is a skill and why do people think differently about it. So what I'm going to read this paragraph. While taxonomies are easy to understand, they tend to oversimplify skills into fixed and discrete entities. In practice, skills are so deeply interconnected, it's difficult to observe a single skill in isolation. For example, cognitive skills and technical skills inform and depend on each other. Complex capabilities like judgment, reflection, cultural awareness are often used together and do not sit neatly within a single domain. All skills may be categorized in different ways depending on the context in which they're applied. So in the context of Australia trying to get to a national skills taxonomy, this question of definition is problematic. We'll come to your PhD work in a minute, but just starting with definition, what's your thinking about definition of skills? Like, what are the things that keep you up at night about this?
Well, I have a very simple explanation and definition, and it's in my mind very firmly that a skill is it's what I can do and what I know, and sometimes it's the application of the knowledge, and sometimes it's not, and it includes cognitive skills. And I think we forget that all the time. We think skills, we do things with our hands, and knowledge is something different. But skills, I see, is what I can do and what I know.
Yeah,
simple as that. And you can have that definition, and it encompasses everything.
Yeah,
it does not define any skill or define an ability or define an activity. What I know and can do is, for me, a good descriptor of what it is.
Well, I think that I agree with you in that simplicity means you've got a lowest common denominator to start with, like what I can know and what I can do. It leads to what I can demonstrate, right? So, that's because skills are about application. There's no point in having a skill without application, which is something that concerns me in the national skills taxonomy definition of skills, which is a piece of work done by the Australian Council of Educational Research. Do you mind if I just read that? Because I
Yeah,
think
I've got it here in front of me as well.
while
Yeah,
it's
go.
helpful, I think it's a bit complex. Skill is a valued and purpose-driven human ability that is acquired or refined through learning and practice. It's a dynamic function of an individual's knowledge, experience, and personal attributes that is continuously influenced by context, interaction with others, and demands of the environment in which it's exercised. Now, that's a description of skills. It's a valid statement. I'm not sure it's a definition. I'm going with you a bit in terms of simplicity. How have you seen that simplicity applied in your experience?
Oh, mainly because people find in RPL, people find it incredibly difficult to describe or align their experiences with a formal structure.
Mm,
It is even in our training package units, which are at task level,
mm,
even that, because the context changes, even at task level, and this is a very granular level. So people, that was my master's study, find it really difficult to connect me and my work and what I do with a taxonomy.
mm,
So the question that I ask them is, what can you do? What do you know?
mm,
And sometimes the best way to do that is to say, well, I don't think you do know that, or I don't think you can do that. And they respond, well, yes, I can. I might not have
mm,
not done exactly that, but the skills that I need to do that, I apply over here. And
mm,
that's when they recognize the transferability or the underlying skill that I'm applying in different contexts.
mm,
If I use that definition to try and help someone to describe their skills or be aware that they are skilled, I think that they would find that ambiguous and
mm.
not helpful. But that's my world, is to help people understand the extent, or to identify and understand the extent and value of their skills. And I find that definition really helpful.
Well, just before we move on to other things, I think it'd be good to give you a moment to describe the research you're doing for your PhD, because I know a bit about that, but how would you describe it? And like, have you settled on a question? And I'm not sure what stage you're at, Deb. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah. Well, I've passed confirmation of candidature. That's always a
Great.
big tick item.
Yeah.
And I'm just after this meeting, I'm having another meeting with my supervisor, Ruth Wallace at Charles Darwin University, just to try and get this ethics through, because
Yeah.
it's quite a complex study. I'm aligning so in my master's study, I studied the challenges in the Australian vet system of RPL candidates when they're going through trying to go through the RPL process. In that study, and a lot of my consultancy work is obviously in recognition of prior learning here and abroad, in lots of different contexts, and sometimes the outcome is not always a qualification. But anyways, there is an empowering aspect. There's the challenges and the frustrations. And I found out from my master's that the policy rhetoric of RPL being a confidence builder is not a given. In
Mm,
fact, it erodes confidence. And in my subject matter, in my research participants, they were educators themselves.
mm,
And they had difficulty with going through the process, and it eroded their confidence in being able to do that matching work.
mm,
So, but then on the other side, the international research that I've found, and pockets with here in Australia, there is an empowering aspect of going through the process and not just gaining the credential at the end of it. So that's what my PhD is about, to be able to identify a candidate value framework, and that will be the output at the end. There will be a candidate value framework,
mm,
and already I'm seeing it's in 4 different areas, and already I'm seeing it's in that guided reflect. The biggest influencing factor towards the benefits that I gain from going through that process is around that guided reflection,
mm,
when I come to know the value and the extent of my skills. And I'm empowered, and this is where it comes into the words, I'm empowered with the words, the common language that I can use when I'm talking to education institutions and when I'm talking to work. So that
mm,
empowering, that process of becoming more learned about my skills and how I've come to be competent, empowers me with a language that has more agency in those two environments. So that's my PhD.
That's fantastic.
Ah.
Leads me to a question,
Mm.
and that is this gap between the way human resource professionals view skills in terms of job descriptions and job tasks, and the way educators view skills. And then there's this underlying thing in this national skills taxonomy work about trying to harmonise the higher ed sector and the vet sector, which feels a bit odd to me because, they serve different purposes. They're both valid and they just serve different purposes. But it leads to this question, so that's the background, leads to the question of how do you see, you just talked about the actualization, self-actualization of the recognition of skills in both the work context and the education context. How do you see the bridge being built? Who builds the bridge? Is there a chance for us to get, jobs and learning more aligned, do you think?
Mm. Let me start by saying that Australia is in a really good place compared to other nations. We're always, the Australian forums say, that employers' respect and utility of the vocational sector is reducing, and that it's not aligned with industry needs. However, it's more aligned than most countries I've seen. So let me say that our concept and policy framework around how we get industry to be engaged with the JSCs into skill definition and design is something that the rest, many countries are looking to do. So
JSCs, by JSCs, you mean the Jobs and Skills Councils,
councils,
the industry bodies, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I know that they could do better, and that skills, the work world is moving very fast, and our system is currently clunky, but I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater. In terms of, so I'm just working with a mid-size organisation at the moment, and moving them towards 9001 accreditation. That's my other hat. And looking at their growing the skills within their organisation and looking at their job descriptions. And then, of course, there's no place there for skills. And I'm inserting that into there. And when I insert those skills, I'm using they've got an organisational capability framework, which I built as well. But I'm inserting in that technical skills from TGA, training.gov. So training.gov is really good in terms of the technical skills. However, they're good for those skills that go across occupations. But what they're not good of is they pigeonhole into almost one occupation or one industry sector. And that's, I think, is a problem. It's a really big problem.
And you get duplication and you get
So there's
odd contexts.
172 current units of competencies for communication.
Yeah, 172.
Yep.
That's a number. I'm going to write that number down because I wondered about how many. Communication is the obvious one that everyone uses as the one that is in every job, right? Communication is in every job.
So one's called facilitate effective workplace communication.
Yeah.
So what industry sector would that be in?
I don't know. Yeah.
It's the electricity supply.
There you go.
Yeah. And so these cross-occupational or transferable skills, we don't do this well in Australia. We have it is a wicked problem, and we don't do it well at all. We do have other taxonomies, and I'm not convinced the one that we're trying to build now is the answer, because we've got the foundation skills taxonomy, we've got the core skills for work framework. That is great. The Australian core skills framework and the digital skills literacy framework, they're all national frameworks. The FSK units are sitting on training.gov. They're not picked up
Mm.
because there's no industry context there. And
Mm.
so there's no buy-in from employers because that doesn't look like what I use, but they do.
Mm.
So I don't,
Well, just back to the project you work on, because I find that really interesting that you're actually going to train.gov to populate job descriptions. Are you using unit of competency level descriptions, or are you going down to the task level? What are you finding
no,
yourself doing?
unit of competency,
Yeah.
particularly because this particular company wants to be able to grow their people.
Mm.
So that's connects the world of work and the world of learning.
Yeah, and makes what you're putting in aspirational for some people who are doing those jobs, I'd imagine. So
But
that
it's
leads to
also
the training.
even as a resource itself,
Mm.
it's great to go because lots of people, again, they know they do the job, but when you look at a unit of competency, it pulls apart the task, and you suddenly realize, oh my God, I do this, I do this, I do this. Like nobody can recognize their job when it's been advertised if it's their job. You know what I mean? You don't know what you know a lot of the time.
Mm.
And when a employee can look at the task as it's pulled apart, disaggregated,
Mm.
they can learn just by looking at that unit of competency
Mm.
and the associated knowledge. A lot of the time, not all the time, they're unaware of the underpinning first principles, the
Yeah.
101s, the I don't know, the rules of effective communication, turn
Yeah.
taking, mirroring, and all that. They might
Messaging,
do
voice,
them.
all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
for me, it gives articulates what is involved in what I do, and it gives the person, it acknowledges what the level of their skill and the value. So
Yeah.
I think connecting units of competencies with job descriptions is a great way to do that.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Leads me to another question, though. We muck around with the words, and look, I want to acknowledge too, because just knowing our audience and knowing other people, there are other taxonomies in use, like other taxonomies, other definitions in use. If you're in the IT world, you're either in the Google or Microsoft world, they've got their own kind of taxonomies that are their own thing, tasks and capabilities and cultural labels and glossaries and so on.
Mm.
And there's a wonderful international one that, we know is used heavily by the Australian Public Service. And I know Grant's with us today, Grant Nicholson, and that's the Sophia Network, which is Sophia capability framework. It's a fantastic thing. And international, which is another question, right? What is the value of international standards for these things? But my question to you was, when you think about competency, skill, and capability, do you have a nice, neat separation in your head about those three things? Because I find that all
No.
a bit messy.
Competency, skill, and what?
Competence, skill, and capability.
Capability.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm starting to build my own working definition, but like that's just me.
Mm.
It's there. I think Anitza put up a LinkedIn article a while ago. She did a search
Yeah.
for an international definition of skill. What is a skill? And
Yeah.
there is there's no
No.
consistent. And how is that different to competency? Like
Mm.
France will say it's KSA, knowledge, skills, and
Attributes. Yeah.
aptitude or attitude.
Aptitude.
Like, where does attitude come from?
Yeah.
Like where did that start? Oh, because we couldn't fit it into skills or knowledge.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for me,
Well, even that, I find there's three A's, right? And they're all different. There's aptitude, attitude, and attribute, right?
yeah.
Like mastery or score or something, And even under the KSA model, I've seen all three used, as the A's
Mm.
in it. At least, as
I
you say,
try, I
knowledge and
try,
skill are one thing. Yeah.
I try and avoid the A, and the
Yeah.
reason why, particularly around aptitude, it
Yeah.
doesn't sound like it's learnable. It
Yeah.
sounds like I'm going to have that in me, I'm born with it, or I'm not.
Or it's subjective. It's someone else's said.
Yes, we can't
Yeah.
assess it.
No. Yeah.
So that's why I just stay with skills and knowledge.
Yeah.
And to me, together, in the application of it, that's another A word, application.
yeah,
Thailand uses that. Is it makes a person competent to do something.
yeah. So this is all very useful. I'm just going to encourage any questions right now. We've got about 10 minutes left. So if someone would like to ask a question, please put it in the chat. But just picking up this theme, uh, uh, I've just got a comment there from Grant. Think of capability as ability. Yeah, that's reasonable too. So, and the observed application, it's a great definition. To become a competency, a capability needs to be placed in a workplace context. Yeah, that's a great way of thinking,
Well,
Grant. But
capability is the skill without the context.
yeah, yeah. So the point about that, Grant, you've given us a great definition, and Grant works as the architect for the Australian Public Service of these things, so he's had to deal with these things deeply, and I know that. Thank you for that contribution. And again, from Mark White to everyone, capability equals human ability, skills equals task or function based performance, context specific, and competency broad knowledge and performance standards. Yeah, they're quite reasonable ways of thinking, of course, Mark, as well. But what we've got to acknowledge is people think differently about this. And there's a lot of top-down thinking that goes on, and so on. So Wendy's asked a question, where does aptitude fit in to someone's story, which is more than just about learned skills or knowledge? You were saying you avoid it a bit, but where does it fit? Do you think aptitude is a thing?
Well,
I
I
agree
think
with you.
it's
It's hard to
I
measure.
think it's a skill.
Yeah,
And the reason why I say that, because I'm in the assessment world.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and if you can name it as a skill, well, then somebody can learn what is associated with that aptitude, and I can learn it.
Mm,
I can grow in it. I can
yeah,
master in it.
yeah.
And the risk of saying that it's outside of the skills world
Mm,
is that unfortunately, the
mm,
work world needs it.
mm,
So we need to say that it is something that we can learn, teach, and assess.
mm,
And for me, that's a skill.
yeah.
And there are outcomes of applying those skills,
Mm. But
and
another
no outcomes you can assess.
Thanks, Wendy, for that question. Another contribution from Grant is just about the idea that aptitude is the propensity or opportunity to learn for someone has to gain a skill too. So there's all these things, all these attributes to skills that are not the skills themselves.
Well,
Um,
interesting, in the capability framework that I built
mm,
for this organization in collaboration with them, they wanted to pull in the company's values. And curiosity
yeah,
is one of those capabilities.
yeah. But it's a
And
skill too in itself, in a way.
absolutely.
So yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, from Taruna from Vancouver, thank you for that. Skills equals abilities and techniques a person can perform. Competence is a contextual application, skills plus knowledge and behaviors. Yes, all on the same kind of theme, but subtly different. And in the application, subtly different. Um, uh, and Wendy, I find this humorous. I hope that's what you think too. What about things like being extroverted or introverted? Behavioural attributes, I suppose. Can you learn? Can be useful, but how do you learn them? Are they just human behavioural things? We've all done our Myers-Briggs, right? So they're great comments. Thanks, everybody. I want to pick up this theme though of the fact that top-down definitions. Like we've a number of experts on this call all got subtle nuances about these definitions. I like to come back to your point, and I think as we come towards the last few minutes of this call, I want to draw it back to standards because I think I have a view that what's missing is standards. And where you and I align is this simplicity of can, know, can do, right? Because if we are to find interoperability in an information science sense, that you could actually map dislike things and become a lot more, map job descriptions to units of competency automatically rather than manually as you're doing, then we've got to get to a lowest common denominator that a machine can read, and I think that's what I like about You do it for a different reason. You've got to the lowest common denominator for a different reason. But for me, in my work, and of course, people are aware at SkillsAware, we're trying to automate this process of mapping as much as we can between dislike things using AI. That's what SkillsAware is all about. Um, um, the lowest common denominator helps, I think, except you and I agree with about each other, so there's no conversation much. Others may disagree. I'd be interested if anyone's got a comment in the chat, but can know, can do. I remember it was David Morgan, from Artibus, who sat me down because he did Skills Book a lot, and um, it will surprise no one that he and I are great friends, and SkillsAware has some heritage in Skills Book and what it did. But he got down to the can know, can do, and then adding some level of mastery, like if that was needed for a context like a score or a level of behavior or level of aptitude. But it is complex, this question. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of adding a level of complexity,
Mm.
I think that then changes the skill.
Yeah.
You
Maybe.
know,
Yeah.
a skill, if there's a range of complexity or performance in a skill, well then your doing words for describing the skill, the ability to do something changes.
Mm.
Follow, lead, innovate.
Mm.
So, you may be talking about the same skill, but but it's being used
Yeah.
at a different proficiency level. So then it becomes a different skill.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think there's a theme. Look, the people on this call, we're all going to have a different view on this, but I'm with you completely. Can know, can do is the safe ground, and you can make that. I just know from the information science, you can make that a standard. If we had standards rather than definitions, like this is me influencing you, but which is not why we're doing the interview. But if we had standards rather than definitions, in other words, if we could have containers like the information science containers, where people could put the right words in a comparable container, do you think that would help? Because I think that's what's missing in this whole conversation is a commitment to, like, there's people have talked about the rich skill descriptor standard and as a way of you know operating with a container that becomes machine readable. Do you think that would be helpful, or do you think that's just a sidebar and not the main problem?
Um, I'll respond like I usually do.
Yeah,
Yes, it can be helpful, but I think what's more helpful is to build individuals' skills literacy, and we've talked
yeah,
about this too.
yeah,
And effort needs to be in there. If there is a common language that they can use,
yeah,
great. But that might change when they change countries, or
mm,
it may like coming up with one global taxonomy or
yeah,
standard is to me, and then that's accessible by the millions of people that actually are not connected digitally.
yeah,
I think for me, it is about teaching skills literacy, and
yeah,
that's teaching someone to become more aware and in control of their learning.
yeah,
And to me, then they'll look around. I'll give you an example if I can in these 2 minutes.
yeah,
Um, I'm working with a not-for-profit in Hong Kong, an asylum
mm,
seeking centre where people are stuck in limbo for on average 10 years, which is less than the average for asylum seekers across the world.
mm,
And we're working on, because now skilled refugees is becoming the flavour because lots of countries are closing their doors to asylum seekers and refugees.
mm,
But there's a skill shortage. Okay, we're going to accept them with those refugees with skills. So now we've got to be able to have a definition of those skills that can be recognised in whatever country they go to. We don't know. We don't know which country that they're going to go to. So we don't know which taxonomy to use, what words to use. So
mm,
what we've done is we've built a capability framework
mm,
for the organisation
mm,
and teaching them how to map what
mm,
I do, what I know with a formal structure. And that mapping, that's the skill.
That's the literacy.
Yeah,
that's the literacy, isn't it? And I think I'm with you. I think we need skills literacy. I also think we need standards because they create the wrappers that can be used around the world. The notion of having one definition of skills or one taxonomy the whole world can use. It's Mark White makes a point that in a domain like engineering, that might be possible, where there are already engineering standards or programming. Grant, thanks for that contribution. Other places where there are very specific technical domains might be possible, but generally I think it's impossible. It's a cultural question, right? Now we've come to the end of our time. What a rich conversation I've enjoyed, and thank you everyone for your contributions in the chat. And Deb, I'd just like to thank you for your time today. I look forward to our ongoing friendship. And for everyone who's come today, there's a webinar. You'll get a link to the webinar if you want to share it with others. And thanks for your participation. And bye for now.
Thanks, Mark, and everybody for contributing.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.